That was awesome. Yes. Hello. Hi. It's mid-afternoon. It is super dark in here, so take a moment, take a deep breath, whatever helps get through the afternoon after the snacks start to kick in a little bit. So my name is Sonya Green, and I'm going to talk to you about culture debt, which is a term I'm pretty sure I made up, and I know that tons of other people have as well. And I'm going to start with an emoji equivalent of my job history. It was this or an interpretive dance. So this is what you get. So I was raised on a farm in Iowa, and I've done like one of a million jobs. There aren't emojis for everything I've done, but along the way, I got a master's of library science and was a children's librarian. This is what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up, eventually. And from there, I didn't realize it, but there was a better fit for me in the world. Like being a children's librarian was great, but turns out I'm really good at stuff in tech. And I had this bridging job at a social networking site for book lovers. That's how we get into it. And then after that, in about 2011, I joined a company called GitHub, right? So this was 2011. I was employee like 37. I was hired part-time as their first non-technical support person. So like, if you've ever not figured out how to reset your password, that totally happens. And this company it was a very flat hierarchy at the time. And so that was the beginning of my time with GitHub. And then about 2.5 years later, my title was Vice President of Support. Yeah, right? I mean, which is for a number of reasons, including I'm awesome. And then I'll tell you why and how you can do the same. So then in June, I left, and the company was about 300 people. So I have seen a lot of scaling in a number of ways. And one of the things that I found what made me successful was that I understood both the explicit and the implicit culture of that company. And I've also garnered some very strong opinions on it. I have written like 5 talks for you all. And I had to pare it down because I have so much to say about this. So this is what you have. So anyway, I left in June, and now I'm working at a company called Carbon 5, which, if you're not familiar, is it's like an A-team of veteran designers, developers, and product managers who build digital products for clients. And I'm doing business development for them. And this is a company that's grown incredibly slowly, and it's been awesome to be there and see some of the cultural signals that they have that are different than what I've experienced elsewhere that I'm really enjoying. So, culture. This term it's co-opted, it's overused, it seems to be really dear to us in technology to use as describing part of what we really think is important. And it's often under or totally undefined as a value. So to start, together we will define this. Well, I'll mostly do most of the talking, but we'll define it and apply it so that you have some context, because that is super important to be able to extrapolate from. And then I have some good examples, which can be inspiration for you. I have some bad examples, which are super fun, and things that you can be on the lookout for. And then I thought of a couple of things that might be helpful for you leaving today and that you can think about. So I've been reading a lot on a Kindle, and I now have the same feeling, like, you know, that like in real life when you're like, oh, I just want to Control-Z this. I now have the feeling whenever I see a word I want to know the definition of, I just want to like touch it, it highlights, and then I get the definition. So I've done that for you. So this is a definition of culture: the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. Awesome. To some degree, this is metaphorical for us because what we are talking about is applying this to a company, so that is somewhat different. So beyond your product, you have your workplace, you have the way that you talk to each other, you have the way that you treat each other, you have the way that you make decisions together, and you have ways of breaking stalemates. Those are some examples that I could think of off the top of my head of like what these manifestations of our collective human intellectual achievement might be. And so thus, your culture affects your company and it affects your product and your bottom line, whatever your bottom line might be. And so there's some big reasons to spend some time thinking about this. All right, are you ready for my awesome analogy? I love analogies, and I thought of one for you because as I was thinking about it, I was realizing that there are kind of these two things. There's what we seem to talk about, and kind of like this base that I came to as I was writing 5 talks. At the root of this tree, you have your values. You have these tenets that are probably going to last quite a long time. And then at the top, you have whatever you want to call the cultural artifacts, the signals that come from your culture. They are like leaves. These come and go, and these change as your tree grows. That's the scaling. So it's just, so my message is with this, don't get too fixated on the leaves. And I totally chose like the most stereotypical startup ones, but these are things that people I've heard, so they're in some way legitimate. But we're gonna talk about them for a minute. Because culture is not the things that people often say when they're trying to describe their culture. Like we really love craft beer. It's awesome, but that's a byproduct of a culture that you have. And so there is value in observing these, and so as far as this cultural debt is, you need to figure out what this means. And so some of these are byproducts for sure. Others are more useful if you're going to look at these cultural outcomes and see if there's something that maybe needs to change or is problematic or is awesome and you'd like to find a way to do more of. So the ones on the right are a little bit more like what I have in mind. Looking at activities and forms of group celebration or overcoming problems is a nice way to see how these outcomes work. Like, so how does your what does your winter party look like? What happens when there's a birthday in the office or at your company? And then it's doubly important when bad things happen, when things go wrong. Like what happens when a project fails, when something doesn't work out right. It can get really dark. I decided not to go there with you today. But or like a really great one that I experienced recently was what happens when an employee leaves? What is that process like? Is that a celebration? Is that just like an awkward walking off the stage? These are ways to look at what is happening with your company and how people can participate in it. So, to the roots, figurative roots. This is the key. This is the message I have. It's totally an opinion. There are others out there, but this is how I feel about it. The root of your culture are values, and those values come with trade-offs. And if you're able to share that, meaning that you need to write it down and also make it available to everyone, this makes it explicit, and this makes it a whole lot easier because everyone knows what the boundaries are. There we go. So writing it down is hard. There's a talk that I saw that really spoke to me. There's a video that you can totally watch. A guy named John Crawford he's the CEO of Store Envy. He was at FailCon, or he was speaking at FailCon, and gave a talk called Building a Dysfunctional Team, which is super satisfying anyway. And it was about his company culture and what he was building with what he wanted was rock star designers and like what happened with that. Also, the librarian and me totally made a slide of primary source materials for you at the end, which you'll also have after today, so don't worry about trying to write this down. So what you can do with this, if you can take the values that aren't understood well and make them concrete for your team, then you have the boundaries that you need to work with. Because when values are explicit, then you can extrapolate. When what you have is something that's context-rich, there's so much more that you can synthesize. And I mean this for every person, not for you necessarily, anyone in your company. And then if you know this, then you can have meaningful work, and you can feel satisfied knowing that you get the best of having both like really specific guidelines and boundaries, and then freedom within that completely for this kind of hand motion. And so these boundaries are also incredibly helpful. So if that's for every person, if you just kind of better understand like how we're going to go about this, or what's a good way of cracking this nut if I don't know where to start. Also for you as a manager, if you have clear boundaries and you have these cultural guidelines that are set in a way that is more than implicit, it means that when you are doing feedback and you're talking to someone who is a really great engineer, really great in so many ways, but like honestly not a culture fit, you don't feel super shitty saying it's a culture fit thing. Because I've heard that, and like most of the time, you can't put it with something that is a boundary, is a value that they can understand that they're not a good fit for, because it's fine for that to happen. So then, like also with firing, which if and when you deal with that, it's really nice to have this stuff set beforehand. So next, I have some examples of some good ways of having things written down well. Here we go. So this one's from Sharethrough. This is just one of their engineering values. And what I really liked about this, Rob shared it with me and then I totally used it. So at the top, we've got valuing decision and learning over perfection. It defines what you are and a little bit of what you aren't. And then there are a couple of high-level kind of aspirational versions of this that give you even more flavor for it. And then this actionable, and in this case, even concrete and historic example. So if you can somehow put together some semblance of these kinds of things, you kind of like prove the case of this with what you've done and how you want to do it. And then if you can imagine, like say you just started at my company and you're looking at this, you might have some better sense of when you run into a kind of problem that this might be the value to look at and see if it can help you. And next, this slide is from Carbon 5. I just saw this not too long ago, and it meant a lot to me because I totally got it, that says something. So Carbon 5 was founded on this respect for Agile XP. And I don't know if this was a hand-raising thing that happened earlier, but are people familiar with Agile or XP, meaning extreme programming? Is that something that someone know? It is a fairly specific paradigm to work within, and it can be really misused. And a dirty word for some of my friends. But when it is applied well, and in this company, it's absolutely the right time to use this kind of tool. And applied to the right situations, which this company also has, it means that we can have something like this where we know what success means for us. And this is hard because I can't get into too much of it with you, but like how this is slightly smaller and how this is slightly wider means something to me, knowing that for the most part, because of the pairing every day, and if you run into a problem, you shouldn't hit your head on the wall against it too much. Go find someone and ask them to help. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, I have a problem, you are expected to help them. That's less here for that reason. And I should mention that Carbon 5 got the idea for this kind of visualization from a talk by Gail Swanson, also in that slide at the end. So cultural debt, a term I totally made up, along with organizational debt, which is a whole other talk that we can have some other time. Cultural debt. Let's define this. So I took my best crack at what I think this means in the context and for the purpose of this talk. So culture debt, it's supposed to be like technical debt. You're never going to have none unless you're refactoring all the time and getting nothing done. So this is accruing cultural manifestations, that's accruing those leaves that are unwanted or inconsistent with what you would like to have be the case. So next we're gonna look at some bad examples, which are, I don't know, they're fun and cathartic. I had a class once where we had a slideshow of bad examples and it was just so much fun, like popcorn eating stuff. So as we do this, this is when you can use that empathy that is an important trait of being a manager outside of all of the other skills that you have. And something that, another thing when I was thinking about like why was I successful at GitHub and what could I share with you? I am empathetic and that was something I worked on a lot. I also realized that it wasn't alone, it's that I was also using pattern recognition and pulling those together. So like together they're exponentially helpful. When you can kind of get a sense of how people are doing or why, and then you notice patterns across that is like a superpower. That is like laser vision. So think about these next examples as if there was someone who was just starting at your company. Because new folks are going to struggle with learning the implicit, although you can also notice patterns with your best performers and what they're getting tripped up by, or if there's a pattern in your worst performers, possibly also a pattern. All right, so this is my slideshow of cultural debt. These were a couple of things that popped up that seem to be patterns. The first one is culture by slogan. What this is missing is that like it's clearly more than this, and we're not saying that because it's really easy to put this on a T-shirt or say it. So I thought of a couple of them. Google had "Don't be evil," that's a great boundary, but then it's hard when you are dealing with a situation where maybe it's gonna not come off real great. Or 20% time. Where it's something that you feel is a value that you like to have. This is one of the leaves, honestly, but it's not the same for everyone, and that's not something that was at least outside of Google that was shared. I only heard about it as like, oh, it turns out, that wasn't the case for everyone. Facebook had move fast and break things. I mean, that's one that, like, can you imagine telling somebody that and being like, okay, go build stuff? I assume that within that company there was far more context and understanding of how to use that concept than was shared externally. Let's hope. And then work on what you want to, which has an asterisk because this is a phrase that was popular and expressed from GitHub a couple of years ago that I experienced, and I have a story for you about that in a little bit. Another one is cultural obfuscation. So this is where the naming conventions you have, the Wi-Fi password, whatever those are not funny, or they're not, you don't get it, and in fact they can come off as seeming kind of insensitive, or it is more confusing than it is helpful. Like I've been in a situation or worked for a company where their servers had really complex and difficult to type Greek god and goddess names, and needing to remember which one this was a while ago, needing to remember which one was which had to do with knowing about those gods. So there are a couple of ways where this can make it more difficult for people who are coming on, or if you find that you or other people are tripping on the same things over and over. It's not that you have to get rid of everything and become beige, and I think that's the fear otherwise. It's that when you notice that there's a pattern of confusion, that means that you're getting drag, and that's time to retire them, come up with new ones. It's fun to create stuff like that, and it's fun to name things. And the last one that I have to share is when your values conflict with what's actually going on. So it may say on the wall of a company that they value work-life balance, but if in reality there are nap rooms and there's laundry on site or there's 3 meals and really it's kind of expected that you're at dinner and maybe work a little after, then those are incompatible, and that's something that you can notice. You don't have to fix all of this, just noticing it is huge. And I wanted to take time to talk specifically about hiring, because you totally accrue cultural debt just like you accrue technical debt. It's part of how this goes. But when we talk about hiring, we're talking about people who are maybe not even getting the chance to interview with you. And so this is one that this is why I'm going to extrapolate a little bit even beyond, or even to go with what Megan was saying. So some of the debt that you can have is when you have implicit cultural assessments in interviewing, which I have totally done in my early days. The beer test, their work's pretty good, but like I can't see sitting down and having a beer with them. That's homogeneous. That involves me liking you. That does not mean that person will be a good addition to the team. I've come up with a slightly better one called the weekend test, which is, and hopefully this is not actually the case, but if you find yourself, if you can envision on a Sunday, you're going to go into the office because you have to, assuming you have an office. Just go with me on the holodeck cultural reference thing with this example. So you need to go in on a Sunday, and you know this other person will also be there. You don't necessarily work. You're not going to work together, but they're going to be there. And like maybe at some point you'll ask them a question, or in any case, by the end of the day, when you go home, you may have learned something from them. That, if you're going to go this route, might be a better way of thinking about the value that someone brings that you're trying to look for that you might have in the future. Another way that this affects hiring is debt is not considering diversity until later. It's super easy when you're small to want to hire fast and well, because what you don't have is time. If those are the 3 major things. The problem being that, and Megan talked quite a bit about this, so like I just wanted to reiterate it. If you have a group that all looks the same, it is much harder to get people who don't look that or don't act that way to join you, and that problem just keeps going and keeps going. So applied to you, because you maybe aren't in the position to be able to reboot your whole company and start it from scratch, or go back in time, is that it's never too late to start. And thirdly, debt also can show up in that paragraph in your job description that talks about your culture in a way that is describing a homogeny that's not actually needed. An example of this is there's a blog post by a founder of the company Good Eggs. I don't know if anyone knows that company. Yeah, awesome. Okay, Good Eggs is this company that helps provide local foods. So in the job description, they talked about you have a passion for local foods. they went through, I believe it was a Code 2040 diversity training, and after that I kind of realized, and this blog post outlines, that having access to local foods is something that's relatively privileged. And to be a good engineer at this company does not actually require that. And they rewrote their job description, and it now says something about like, you are passionate, or like you would like to make change in this world and you'd like to do it with us. Gets the same point across, doesn't come with the baggage or the signals that you don't mean to send. There are a couple others as I was thinking about this, like functionally. There's also reusing job descriptions that you haven't maybe looked at, or like, you keep tweaking the top to make it quippier and better, but then like the job specs are outdated and you're asking for technologies that you don't actually need for what this job is now. So something that you can do is just like check those over, because what you're otherwise doing is signaling to the group of people who might be looking at this and not letting the right people filter in. Okay, are you ready for my story? So, work on what you want to was a slogan that GitHub had. It was a popular phrase. It was blogged about. People from GitHub gave talks on it, and it mutated within the company. Because it's really easy to remember the short version, and it sounds really awesome, like move fast and break things. And it was especially easy for engineering to embody this. Other teams, like ops or like support, that's the world that I lived in, had to extrapolate how to use this value in a realm that wasn't as flexible. So the real version of this in the company, even when you didn't forget it, was you work on the intersection of what you want, what's important, and what others need. And so in the support team, we were a like 90% remote team. And so the way that we worked was using a GitHub repository that had no code in it. And we would use the issues to talk about like social issues or like non-technical issues. Ideas that we'd have, decisions that were being made, conversations that we needed to have. And we got to a point where we were enough people and we were taking 24-hour support 7 days a week seriously that we had to talk about our vacation policy, because we had an unlimited vacation policy. And when you work when you want to, that does not work for support. That doesn't work for all the users who need the team. So we referenced this version in a GitHub issue, if you want to imagine how this technically worked. And we looked at how this worked for us. It was easy to prioritize that what's important is the users and responding to them and making sure that doesn't fall down. And it was easy to say next that for what you want and what the rest of the team wants is to be able to take vacation, because burnout is a very real thing, especially in support. And then just making sure that that process by which we take vacations is something that's understood and is functional and that everyone else knows what it is, was the way that we applied this. So as we wrote this down, as we talked about it, we were referencing this value. This value had a URL to it that we were referencing. And as we talked about it, we showed our work of how this value was being applied. And so we were able to apply this, and everyone could see it, and that helped reinforce this value in its best way, rather in the just work on what you want to way. So, in paying down debt that you may have been given with your new role, I was thinking about a couple of things. You can't necessarily fix everything in your company, but you can certainly affect your team. And so some of the things that you can do are help to calibrate, which is I swear the word just came up, but then I realized it was also the name of the conference. One option is to have a cultural retrospective with your team. You can also do this for yourself. I'm a big fan of the I like, I wish, because I am conflict averse and I can't even say mean things. So being able to say, like, these are the things I like about how we work and how we apply these values. And be able to say, like, I wish this was different. And that also leads to a conversation about how we would like to have this be different in our team. Another way is to do the thing that I kind of described with the support team. And when you reiterate the value, when you show it in your work, when you are having a conversation with folks and you pull it in because that's what you're referencing in your head, you're helping to reiterate implicitly, but applied to something that is written down. And the other thing that you can do is, outside of you and your team, you are also working with your peers and with everyone else, be it up or flat or whatever it is, that you can ask questions, you can ask for clarification, and you can most certainly have an opinion on this when this does come up or when you'd like to bring it up. All right, so here are primary sources. I believe you'll have access to this afterwards, so I won't keep this up for too long. And they're all available. Even the 2 talks have videos to them. So that's it.